Hey folks, what's going on? It's me, Andrew Westmoreland, back again with another stream. Now, Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, has, I guess, completely lost her mind. I don't know how else to say this. I don't know that there's a polite way to say this. But she decreed, openly made a call to violence 13 hours ago on Twitter. She says, again, this is Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago. She says, to my friends in the LGBTQ plus community, the Supreme Court is coming for us next. This moment has to be a call to arms. Has to be a call to arms. Her follow-up tweet, we will not surrender our rights without a fight to victory. This is a call to violence. I'm not opposed to calls for violence. There's always a time and a place. There is a defensive way to do this. If you are being attacked, you have a right to defend yourself. America was founded on a defensive call to arms, which is a call to violence. Okay, however, we're seeing the double standard here, and clear as day form here. The double standard is that leftists, that Democrats, are allowed to make calls of violence. Politicians are allowed to make calls to violence, but moderates, centrists, conservatives, and the far right are not allowed to make calls to violence. This tweet, again, came up, as you can see, 9:56 p.m. yesterday, 13 hours ago. Okay? It is still up on Twitter. There is no sensitive content warning. There is no editorial tag like at the bottom of a lot of tweets. So Twitter will say things like, this tweet is misleading. This is medical misinformation. Whatever it says. Or they even did a special thing for Donald Trump before they banned him, where it would say that this tweet violates our terms of service because this is an elected politician. We believe that it has public relevance and blah, blah, blah. They didn't do anything yet. I'm not saying they necessarily should do that. I'm pointing out the double standard and the hypocrisy. They didn't do anything for this. This is a direct call to violence. This moment has to be a call to arms. What does a call to arms mean? Now, there's people trying to defend Lori Lightfoot in the comments and the responses down below. And the obvious first definition of what a call to violence is it literally means, a literal translation in modern times would be, go grab your gun and we're going to go fight somebody. We're going to some kind of a violent conflict. We're going to go to war or go to some kind of armed conflict. That's what a call to arms is. You're grabbing your guns. I'm asking you to grab your guns, your weapons, so we can go take care of business. Her follow-up tweet, we will not surrender our rights without a fight to victory. So the context is literally, grab your guns, grab your weapons. To be fair, arms is weapons. It doesn't necessarily mean guns. Grab your weapons, and we're going to go fight to victory. This is an elected official, the mayor of one of America's largest cities, actively calling for insurrection and revolution or uprising. This is why I have been saying for 4 or 5 years now that America is facing a civil war. Because the rhetoric keeps getting more and more extreme. We have people on the right who are saying things like this too, but again, the double standard is they get banned off of social media immediately. If anyone even dips a toe in that direction, using what did Donald Trump say? Something like "Let's go fight like hell." His January 6th speech, and they completely take all the context out of that speech and say that that was, he's inciting violence. Who's inciting the insurrection? And it's like, okay, but if you actually listen to his speech, just look at the transcripts. If you don't have to sit there and watch the speech, the transcripts will tell you that he said, go to the Capitol peacefully. Go march to the Capitol peacefully. So they're completely taking his fight like hell comment out of context. It's just like, at a certain point, you have to look at this stuff, and if you've been paying attention, you know what's up. You know that these people are, exactly what they're about, and you should be prepared for extreme political violence in the streets. You should be expecting this summer to be a repeat of 2020, where the left and far left are going to be rioting in the streets uncontrollably, with little to no police or National Guard presence doing anything. They're just going to be standing there watching, pretending to give a fuck, while they burn down your cities. Expect that to happen. This is Mayor Lori Lightfoot of Chicago actively calling for violence, for political violence, to grab your weapons, grab your guns, and we're going to go fight because of the Supreme Court and their decisions. Now, I guess what I'd say is, if the situation was reversed, right, where it was conservatives who feel like the Supreme Court did something crazy, like you don't have a right to guns or something. They did something like that. Like basically some decision to where the Second Amendment is null and void. Yeah, I mean, it's automatic war. Like there's no question about that. So I guess I could see that perspective, but I have to push back, and I have to wonder, like, there's a difference between completely overriding a codified constitutional right. It's literally in the Constitution saying that you have the right to keep and bear arms. Abortion's not in there. Gay rights is not in there. Now, there's like equal protection clause and I believe 14th Amendment and stuff like that, where you could say, what's good for one person, one citizen, that means all citizens should be afforded those equal rights. I think that's fair. So this idea that somehow gay rights is somehow going to vanish because of a Supreme Court decision, it's not possible. It's not realistic, I should say. Anything is possible. It's just not realistic. When we have elected officials, powerful elected officials, openly calling for violence, I mean, like I said before, I'm not 100% opposed to it. There is a time and a place. But they're coming from a place of ignorance. They clearly haven't read, Justice Alito's draft decision on Roe v. Wade, and I believe Casey versus Planned Parenthood. He hasn't read that, or these people haven't read that decision. They don't understand what's in it. They just know, oh my gosh, they're just being told by the news and politicians that women are no longer going to have equal rights as men. It's like, well, we haven't had equal rights since this anyway. Men don't have equal rights to women. Women have more rights than men. And we as a society have kind of just allowed this because it was a compromise. It was a compromise. But look back through your history, through American history. We've made a lot of these compromises and concessions because we were trying to avoid civil war. Look back at the slavery question. We were trying to avoid a civil war. I don't think that's possible. I mean, they tried, and I thank them for trying to avoid bloodshed, but 800,000 people died in the Civil War fighting over the question of slavery. That was a major component. There was other issues, obviously states' rights, but it was states' rights to own slaves, so let's be fair about that. The point is, 800,000 people died in the first Civil War. Can you imagine what a civil war would look like in 2022, 2023, 2024, 330 million people here in America, estimated. And we had a civil war over abortion. Because it's coming. I mean, I've been talking about this for years. I just, all the puzzle pieces were not all there, and some things were gray. I couldn't see the whole picture. But then all of a sudden, this abortion thing pops in. I'm like, whoa, that could do it. I thought about gay rights, and I was like, maybe. It might be something, a contributing factor. It just doesn't polarize as strongly as abortion, which we'll talk about that specifically a little bit later. But this absolutely fascinates me. It absolutely fascinates me that we're here now in 2022, where these aren't veiled threats. These aren't misinterpreted tweets or any. I mean, it's very clearly, you could very clearly see here. The Supreme Court is coming for us next. This moment has to be a call to arms, according to Lori Lightfoot. We will not surrender, and I'm repeating this on purpose. We will not surrender our rights without a fight to victory. It's a literal call to violence. We saw what happened when Donald Trump was misinterpreted as calling for violence. He got impeached twice. Well, two separate issues technically, but he was impeached for it. Now, he wasn't deposed, but he was impeached. And they definitely used this against him in the 2020 election, and it was a contributing factor in why he's still not the sitting president. And I use that term purposefully because there is growing concern over the legitimacy of that 2020 election. Questions I long settled are now resurfacing. New information is coming, new documentaries, and it's starting to make me question things. That aside, which is a huge catalyst for a potential civil war, if people don't believe the election is real, I mean, revolutions are fought over less. So I want people to just look at this and think about it. Think about where this could go, and are you prepared for it? Because for years, decades, over a decade, I've been looking at news and culture and trying to figure out what's happening in the world and my place in it. And I keep looking at this, and I've been seeing this growing pressure, this growing rage and discontent, hatred, and it's been more and more focused over the years. It's gotten to a point where it's very clear and obvious what's happening. I mean, you have actual Satanists promoting abortion. They're marching right alongside the left and the far left. And these Democrat politicians, they're out in the open, and nobody's saying anything other than, okay, well, they have a right to protest too. And it's like, well, that's not what we're talking about. Like, let's be very clear about what's happening here. And you move these people, let me say, it's basically you take a picture. Oh, that's interesting. Satanists are promoting abortion. Okay, cool. Put that aside, and let's talk about the big picture and start adding all these different things together. We're building a case. Okay? We're building a case. Think of it like that. We have a decade worth of evidence that we've been sifting through and compiling. And we are slowly presenting it to the world. Well, the only world that really matters, Americans. The problem is, how do we get this comprehensive database, this stockpile of information, this case that we're building? How do we present that successfully to the American people? Because Republicans are not going to help you out. Like, we have to break free of that. You have people like Scott Pressler, the guy, he's early 20s, hippie-looking dude, gay dude, who is probably one of the most prolific Gen Zers, who is registering thousands of thousands, probably tens of thousands of people at this point to vote, and getting people to Gen Z to turn Republican. Good for him for doing his thing, what he believes in. But thinking that Republicans are going to save us from Democrats and the far left, you're not looking at the whole big picture. Okay, we're thinking, lesser of two evils, all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. I understand that concept, and I'm most likely going to be voting, for a Republican for that fact. But I don't have this in my head where Republicans are going to come out and save it. It's like, no, like the people who run the Republican Party are the same class, same type of people as the people who run the Democrats. Like, they're these elitist scumbags. Okay, they don't believe in our unequal rights for the average person. It's basically, if you have this wealth and influence, you can be a part of this club. And only recently, we're talking like the last few years, only recently, if you are wealthy and you disagree with the Democrats, has it been a problem. Like, look at how they're going against Elon Musk. That's a new phenomenon. It's typically, you're rich. Like, you get a free ride, you get a free pass. Not anymore. But again, so you have that Lightfoot situation. And again, nothing's happening. Nothing's going to happen. There's no police investigation. Obviously, the city of Chicago is not going to investigate her. Is the state... Scott Pressler's 33? Oh, so he's a millennial. My apologies. I thought he was early 20s. Well, he looks like a vampire, so he I don't know what he's doing. I'll be nice to him. He hasn't done anything mean to me, but I was going to make a rude joke, but good for him. But nothing's happening to Lori Lightfoot. Okay, she's probably going to still have her Twitter account. There's not going to be a police investigation. She's probably not going to get impeached from office because Democrats run Illinois. Like 80% of the state is controlled by Democrats. Now, is the rural areas, like if you were to actually say like what's the vote percentages, it's probably 60% Democrat, 40% Republican, but they're not going to be able to get anything done. She's going to be sitting in office. Like, it would take some kind of federal investigation, and I guess the thing that's holding it back right now is there wasn't some immediate riot. There wasn't an immediate uprising for when the communities just got their guns and started like burning down courthouses or something. Like, it hadn't happened in Chicago. So, free speech, right? It's a problem. It's a problem. It's a long-standing problem that we've had with public figures and politicians, not just, both. People who have some kind of a following, that they should be held accountable for their speech and the fallout of that. It's tough. It's tough. It's hard to find that balance. This is related. There was a guy called Da13Sun, DA13 THSSUN, Da13Sun. He was a popular black preacher. When I say preacher, he was preaching like black centrist ideology. He wouldn't use the word black. He would say Moors. He was like the conscious community type of person, an alternative spiritual restructuring of history type of guy. And I thought he was fascinating, really interesting stuff. He had really good information mixed in with his extremist rhetoric. My point is, he had like 50,000 YouTube subs 10 years ago or whatever, when he was at the height of his popularity. And a lady who was a big follower of his, a black woman, I believe was in Florida, she beat her kids to death because she said they had demonic spirits in them, which was a theme of this guy. He was saying a lot of these people are demonic spirits. And she was mentally ill, listened to her every single one of his videos, and she went out and she beat her kids to death. And there's news stories of, if you Google this, the 13th Son, and you look up the news stories and stuff about it, they'll talk about it. He's basically like a online cult leader kind of thing, and he's trying to build his own community out in Key West and stuff like that. It's fascinating, but it's hard because he, as far as I remember, I watched a lot of his content, and I don't remember him saying like you should go beat out, kill demonic spirits. Like, he never really said stuff like that. So my point is, like, even though Lori Lightfoot is absolutely, this is way over that line, like, she's absolutely making call to violence. The question is anybody actually going to act on that, and what's the statute of limitations on that? Do they have a couple hours, a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months? What if a couple years later they're just like an organized group tries to blow up the Supreme Court that are based out of Chicago? They said, well, yeah, back in 2022, Lori Lightfoot told us to do it, so we decided to do it. And let's say it's 2024. Would she still be on the hook for this? I don't know. I don't know how that works. But it's an interesting question. I also want to bring up that the root of this problem here is the Roe v. Wade decision that is slated to be overturned here. Like, everyone's been talking about this, and there's a lot of new arguments that I've heard that are really fascinating. I've been having a lot of conversations off camera, offline. And it actually energizes me. It doesn't make me tired. I don't get depressed on it. I think it's really fascinating. And I win every single argument, every single conversation. Now, that's my perspective, but that's because I'm using Russian concussion says Lori Lightfoot is bad representation of government officials. Absolutely. Abortion is murder. I agree, and I'm about to get into that in just a second. Is there a StreamYard link I would like to add to this Roe v. Wade? Yes, I do have an open invitation for people to come live on the stream. The problem is I have to vet people first. If they've been on my channel for weeks, months, and I can tell how they're talking or how they're what they're saying, that's fine. But just random people at this time, I'm not, new people, I'm not just allowing live on the stream, because it is connected to YouTube, and YouTube has very strict rules, and it can get my entire channel deleted. So unfortunately we have to be careful on that. I do appreciate it, and I do, for the most part, I don't censor anybody, because what's the point? But yeah, I'll definitely say most of your chats live here in the discussion, and we could go from there. But let me fix this. I had this really fascinating conversation. It was probably Sunday, Mother's Day, with a good Canadian friend. Liberal. He would be a liberal here in America, like a Democrat. Probably like a 90s Democrat. He's not like far left necessarily. He's leaning in that, like, right on the teetering edge of progressivism, but he's not super far left. He's not insanely woke or something like that. But he was trying to defend abortion from the Canadian perspective of, I think he gave like 22 weeks or something is when they can do it. There's up to 22 weeks of abortion. Anything after that is banned. There might be some medical exemptions, it's so rare it's not even worth mentioning. And that's kind of what I brought up with the people I've been speaking to on this recently. It's like, you can bring up these anecdotal, extremely rare instances, but it's like, it's almost not even worth talking about. A woman being raped, or a woman raped during an incestuous event. It's like, okay, those are the most extreme conditions possible. Or the woman's going to die from birth if she doesn't get an abortion. It's like, that's, again, it's so rare, it's not even really worth talking about. It's like probably more people get struck by lightning each year than those situations. I mean, we can have a conversation after the fact, after we settle this argument, But for me, we're going into these advanced hypotheticals, but we can't even agree on the most basic thing here. All of that's irrelevant to me. What is a person? What is a human being? And when does that person and or human being have equal rights as you and I do? That's the question that is not settled. Roe v. Wade didn't settle that. This court decision is not going to settle that. Casey did not settle. Casey versus Planned Parenthood isn't going to settle that. And we're never going to agree on this unless we can figure this out, because everyone has a different answer. Anyone who is pro-choice has like a different time period. Oh, well, after 6 months is murder. And it's like, okay, well, why not like a day before 6 months? Why is that not murder? It's like they just have these arbitrary lines that are never explained. Every single person I've talked to has the same kind of argument where they give this arbitrary line of, anything past this is not right. Most of them don't even call it murder. They'll just say, oh, well, we shouldn't do that. It's like, well, why shouldn't you do that? And they dance around and they can't really answer it because they know, it's like, deep down right from wrong, but you're fighting against your nature for some reason to hold on to this tribalist political view. Okay? It's like, that it's not right to abort a baby because it is a baby. For me, how do I describe this? Probably up before a month ago, maybe even less than a month ago. I would say like early on, like 4 weeks. It's still like a zygote. It's barely fertilized. It's not really doing too much. It doesn't have a human form yet. I don't know that is necessarily a human life deserving of personhood rights. But then I thought about it, I'm like, why am I making that arbitrary line? Because it has the potentiality that is a factor too. Like, oh, I mean, if you left it alone, it would become a human being, right? It would become a baby in a couple more weeks. So what's the difference? What's this line? It's like, well, for me, that's one of the only arguments. If it's super early on, like you took the morning after pill, and maybe it may have an aborticant factor. That's debated, of course, but okay, it's barely fertilized. Is that a human being? I don't know that that's fair to call it a human being. I think that it will become a human being if you didn't kill it. But again, where is that line? Where is the line between this is a human being and this is a quote-unquote lump of cells? That's never properly answered. All right, let's answer a couple of these. That's interesting. Yeah, for me, side note, just explanation. Some people ask this question, like, how are you doing this when you're at work? It's like, well, I'm at an armed position post, but yeah, first shift is supervisor position. I'm supervisor, and I'm really just doing gate access, and that's really it. It's mostly gate access. It's the second and third shift that they do actual patrols of the site, which is a little more hands-on. So, I don't know, 95% of my day is free. Whenever someone comes to the gate, I have to take care of it. That's why sometimes in the middle of the stream, I'm like, I'll be right back, because I have to go check someone in that I don't know. But no, I'm allowed to. Russian Concussion says, also just got off of a few woke panels, and the response is always the same. Get talked over, deny science, and when questioned, at what point is abortion okay, they have no consistent answer, then boot it. And that's my point is, if it's someone right, you could probably have a more civilized conversation. Like, I'm not going to sit here and get into a cussing match with my parents or my sister or whatever over abortion. My dad might start cussing, but I'm not going to. That's just not how I roll. But yeah, that's typically the problem is they're not consistent. And when I look at like right wing conservative arguments, they've always been consistent. They haven't really changed historically. It's always been like Republicans don't like abortion, and it's been Democrats who have historically been like, yeah, that's an option. So I'm not really understanding what they like. They're just not consistent here. So Russian concussion. Also, everyone feel free to chat, and we're having a conversation here. Again, Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, openly called for violence. Hold on, let me pop this up real quick. She called for violence, a call to arms, and then said that there would be a fight, and that their fight is going fight to victory and stuff like that. Like literally calling for violence in regards to abortion and the Roe v. Wade stuff. So that's the main topic. So any comments you have, go ahead and drop it in now, and we can talk about it. A human being having equal rights at conception, very clear. Life begins at conception, biology definition. A living being is an entity or cluster of cells that grow, respond to stimuli, adapt, have ability to reproduce. This is third grade biology and basic definition, I agree. When egg gets fertilized by sperm, it has unique genetic code, aka conception, correct. So this is basic science, right? If you this is the problem. There's no consistency with the left, and this is why I left the Democrat Party. Like I walked away. I am politically homeless. I don't consider myself conservative, though I am tribally on the right because the left has pushed me over here. They said, "Oh, you're a conservative, or you're far right, or you're a black racial slurs." We'll say that racial slurs regarding race to people who are conservative. We'll say that. And I'm like, dude, I've been like a left-wing centrist forever. Centrist libertarian forever. I don't really understand. I guess tribally, that's the only reason they call me right wing. But yeah, she did. So let me pop this up again so you can look at this. This was roughly 13 hours ago. She said, "To my friends of the LGBTQ plus community, the Supreme Court is coming for us next," because Lori Lightfoot is a lesbian, married to a white woman. Just for context, this moment has to be a call to arms. Again, she says a call to arms. Her follow-up tweet, "We will not surrender our rights without a fight to victory." So context matters. She's saying without a fight to victory in regards to it being a call to arms. She's literally calling for violence. And like I said before, I'm not opposed to calls for violence if it is justified and righteous. And America was founded on a call to violence. We were being oppressed by a tyrannical government, a tyrannical monarchy overseas, and the people were just tired of it. And, they called to violence. And here we are today, 2022. We have a separate country as a result of that. But, yeah, context matters, and what she's calling for violence for is asinine because it's a hypothetical in a highly unlikely situation. I severely doubt that the Supreme Court, even if it is all 9 justices are conservative leaning or conservative, strongly conservative, I doubt they're going to take away the rights of gay people. Okay, I just don't see that happening. It's just not really realistic. Everyone's so Chicagoan. Actually was more liberal, grew up in Chicago as uber literal family, and Ben Shapiro, scientific not religious, is what swayed me to 2018-ish, or 2018-ish. Yeah. I would say, me personally, rushing concussion, I have slightly gone to the right, but it's not, again, it's slightly on certain issues. I guess abortion, I've gone slightly to the right. I never liked abortion. Even when I was a kid, I just, it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, wait a minute. So a woman gets pregnant by a man, because a woman can't spontaneously just generate life. That's not how that works. A woman gets impregnated by a man, and then 9 months later, some people say 10 months if you want to get all weird and technical. It's like, okay, whatever. But 9 months later, she gives birth. It's a human baby child, infant. Okay, so and even as a child, I wasn't breaking it down like this, but I'm like, okay, so you give birth as a child, but if you abort it, isn't that killing the baby? And I remember using terms like that even as a child, in elementary school, fourth grade, fifth grade, getting it in middle school, sixth, seventh, eighth grade. Somehow, once in a while, it'll pop up into my head. I'm like, that's killing a baby, right? So I don't understand this, that we're having this conversation in 2022 like it's a brand new conversation, and the arguments don't make sense to me. The left will say, it's my body, my choice for this particular thing, but not for other things, and you can surmise what I'm talking about. They'll say that abortion is a medical issue, and I'm like, how is an abortion a medical issue, right? Well, if the woman has some medical condition and the baby's gonna kill her, I'm like, okay, but that's like 1 in 10 million births, 1 in 10 million pregnancies, that there's some kind of condition where the mother may die from giving birth. So it's like, why are you even bringing this up? It's so rare, it's not worth you even mentioning this. I'm like, let's focus on what 99.9% of abortions are. Like, what is it? Well, when you look at the statistics, 99.9% of abortions you're using it as contraception. You don't want the baby. You had unprotected sex, and you don't want to be a parent. That's what it is. Okay, well, that's a totally separate conversation. It's like, okay, well, why didn't you just use a condom? This is a personal responsibility issue. This is not a healthcare issue. It's like the arguments they make are not making sense to me. And Russian Concussion says, don't forget men. That's what I'm saying. It's like, they say, my body, my choice, and then they will say, you don't have a uterus, so you don't get a say. Which is not only incredibly sexist, it's incredibly transphobic, using their own logic and their own terminology, right? Well, they say men can have babies now. Men can get pregnant. There's a pregnant man emoji on Apple. Men can get pregnant, according to them. So what do you mean if you don't have a uterus? Well, that's transphobic. It's sexist because why do you... Again, a woman is not an asexual being that lays eggs or something, or just spontaneously is able to generate a human life. It's a human female who needs a male to get pregnant. Two beings create three. It's not one being creates a second being. So what do you mean the man has no say in this? It doesn't make sense. This is why I say men have less rights than women. It's absolutely true. It's not even close to a debate for me. 100% women have more rights than men. They could abort a man's baby without his consent, no questions asked. She can just walk in there and abort it for no reason. Doesn't have to inform the man. There's no due process. There's no court proceedings. None of that. No written agreement or contract. She could just go in and kill the baby, and the man has no recourse. He can't sue her. He can't file criminal charges. He can't do anything. But this is the fun part. This is the part that is always my mind exploded. I was probably 18, 19, or 20, so this is a while ago. This was mid-2000s, like 2005, 6, 7, something like that. And I heard a case where a man wanted the woman to... he wanted her to have an abortion. He didn't want a baby. The condom broke, or they didn't have a condom or something like that. He did not want to have a baby, and he wanted her to have the abortion. Okay? And she's like, you don't have a say in this, of course, because that's the way the law works in America. He had no say in this. She has the baby, and then guess what? He has to pay child support for 18 years. Again, no say in this. Men have less rights than women. And the flip side too, the man wants the baby. They conceived a child together because, again, it takes a man and a woman, a male and a female, to create a human child. He has no say in if either way. So, yeah, their arguments do not pass basic logic tests. Brandon Hoskins says, if a man murders a pregnant woman, he is charged with 2 murders, not 1. That's another glaring hypocrisy. It's illogical. It makes no sense. She can have an abortion, but it's not a homicide. It's not a intentional homicide, a first-degree murder, second-degree murder. It's just abortion. It's a medical term. But if a woman is even unintentional homicide, there are penalties for unintentional homicide, right? Accidental or involuntary homicide. If you accidentally run over somebody, you could still go to jail or prison. If she is pregnant, let's say you run over a pregnant woman, yeah, it's a double homicide. Homicide doesn't mean murder; it means human killed human, and it has no distinction on whether it was intentional or unintentional. So homicide just means human killed a human, breaking it down in Latin. But yeah, this stuff makes no sense. It doesn't pass basic logic, and they keep going through this circular logic and twisting and turning, and it's just modernism nonsense. This stuff doesn't make sense. And they get hyper emotional, like, oh, you're trying to take away women's rights. It's like, what are you talking about, dude? What are you talking about? You're talking about your rights, your rights, your rights. That's very selfish. What about the rights of the being inside you? But again, this is the difference between the left and the right. The left is pro-abortion, the right is anti-abortion. The pro-abortion side, I'm sick of using pro-choice, pro-life. It's hyper-political. It doesn't get straight to the meat and the potatoes here. Pro-abortionists do not believe that it is a human being with personhood rights until it is born out of the womb. Some are extreme where they actually say you can kill the baby after it is born, which is, we had this here in Virginia. We had a delegate and some delegates with the governor, even Governor Northam, our former governor, was trying to sign off on this bill to where they'd be able to, a woman could give birth to a baby, it has birth defects or something, they would even resuscitate it after it is born if it is, severely birth defected. They'd resuscitate it and then decide if they want to keep it alive or not. It's like, well, that's killing it, a human being with rights, right? So, now the anti-abortion side says it is, for the most part, says it is a human being with equal rights at conception. Now that's debated, obviously. I would say the general conservative is not for abortion at all, but they're for the conservative side that is typically has somewhat of a window, is super early in a pregnancy. They think it's still wrong, but they typically are not like, this is inherently a murder. So that's the difference. It's two worldviews. It's a objective worldview versus a subjective worldview. It's the left versus right. Russian Concussion says, so another question. I taught right after college in 2010 for 10 years until this woke crap. And as mandated reporter, I think that's a slight typo there, but and as mandated reporter will report and can prosecute pregnant lady if she's caught doing drugs. What do you mean, Rand? As a mandated reporter of who and what? I'm not really sure the context of what you're saying, but yes, if there are plenty of states that if a woman is doing drugs or drinking or even smoking, she can get charged with crimes because it would harm the baby inside, of course. And if I'm understanding you correctly, yeah, because it ain't your body. Right. The baby is not the mother's body. Now, my Canadian friend was talking about this. It's so fascinating. It was like the only real, well, that's a separate one, but he was saying that, or trying to make that argument that, oh, it's connected to the woman's body, therefore it is a part of her body. And I'm like, I don't know that I would, that I don't think that's a good analogy, because again, 99.9% of pregnancies are consensual. They were like, the woman had her choice, like her body, her choice. Yeah, she chose to have sex with a man unprotected, or maybe she was protected, and just sometimes things happen. What do you think sex is for? Biologically, anyway. Sometimes you get pregnant. That's kind of the whole point. But that was her choice. The infant inside is a separate third entity in the equation. It is a new life. It is not her. So again, the logic, it's just basic logic that we're not really talking about here. What? J80cc2 stroke says, critically think about it. A trans man should be free to have an abortion. That's a human right as an American. It's a personal freedom. Makes sense now. Is there comments that are not coming through? Because that's like half of a comment. And no, it doesn't make sense. Like, I understand the concept of a transgender person. Okay, a biological. You're saying biological female makes no sense. It's redundant. A female transitions to become a man. You can't transition to be a male, but you're a female transitioning to cosmetically and chemically, at least hormonally, to look like a man. That is, you can possibly get pregnant if the hormones don't destroy your ovaries and your womb, your uterus. Yeah, it's possible for a trans man to get pregnant. Um, should they be free to have an abortion? No, I don't think so. I think abortion is killing a human being, a person, and I think that we should try to stop that as much as possible. I admit that there is a slight challenge of this next argument. I have issues with, because I'm not 100% decided on this one particular issue, and that's the issue of rape. Okay, this is the only argument in the whole abortion debate where I'm willing to, like, really listen. Like, please talk about this. Please tell me why you should be allowed to have an abortion if you were raped. Now, that was my original thing. It was like, of course, that's a talking point. Everyone says, oh, I'm against abortion, but only for rape and incest. It's like that's just like a thing that just naturally comes out because everyone's repeated it so much. And then I started thinking about it like this last month. I'm like, wait. Did the baby rape you that's inside of you? The baby didn't rape you. The baby is entirely innocent of the whole situation. It has nothing to do with this. Unfortunately, this evil was put upon the woman, right? It's a terrible, evil act to be raped, or to be a rapist. I totally get that. It's a horrible crime. Personally, I am strongly in favor of the death penalty for that kind of crime. The problem is, you don't want to give the death penalty to a rapist if you got somebody pregnant and you're against abortion. Well, they are financially obligated for the next 18 to 20 years to assist that child. This is where it gets really, this is the only argument that I have serious questions about. Because, all right, well, this guy is financially on the hook now because he raped this woman and he impregnated her, and I don't think she should get an abortion. Okay. Now this woman has to deal with the trauma of, not only was she brutalized and abused, now she has to carry her abuser's baby for 9 months. And I'm not saying she should be like, no one, to me, no one is forced to keep a child after it's born, right? You can give it up for adoption and that sort of thing. I'm 100% for that. I think it's morally, ethically wrong, but you should have that choice. I'm not going to say that the law will, oh, you had a baby, therefore you have to take it. You're like, not necessarily. But that man who presumably convicted of rape is now going to be in prison, right? Presumably, the legal system would be able to absorb or take care of this in a way that all of his assets are going to be now absorbed for that raped woman to care for this child, assuming she wants to care for the child. If she doesn't want to care for the child, I would say his assets should be divided between the woman and the child. Like, liquidate his assets. The woman gets compensation, like monetary compensation for the rape. That baby, the assets will follow the baby. Hold on one second. All right, my apologies. Where was I? Oh, talking about the woman would get compensation from the man who raped her, and the compensation for the baby would be liquidated too, and it would follow that baby in the foster care system or wherever that baby goes. Maybe family would take it. On the mother's side, the father's side is a rapist. They get no rights. I think that's fair. They get zero say or rights. I think that's fair. I think that's justice. Now, this is where it gets weird. What if the man doesn't have a lot of assets to care for this child? Would society be okay with compelling him to work to support this child? What I mean by that is slavery. Would we be okay with enslaving a rapist to compensate the raped woman who is pregnant and has a baby now? That is a fascinating question. Because if you remember, look at the 13th Amendment. Slavery never ended in America, and that is one of the biggest lies we were taught in school. Slavery did not end in America. It was transferred from private ownership to the state. The government owned slaves. Okay? The 13th Amendment says the right to keep... let me be very specific on this. 13th Amendment text. Neither slavery nor involuntary solitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Okay, let me read the most pertinent part of that. Neither slavery nor involuntary solitude, except, keyword is except, there is an exception to this, as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So slavery is legal in America, and yes, we are legally allowed to say, hey, rapist, you raped this woman, guess what? You are now a slave to the state, and they could legally say, any action that we force, any labor we force you to do, the proceeds of that go to the woman to care for the child. That is legal in America. Ethically, I think that's an interesting question. It's a very interesting question. All right, there's a lot of comments here. You said you personally, Russian Concussion says, I personally called the CPS to report a prego who was doing meth. She thankfully got help at rehab, but ask a pro-choicer, can someone pregnant legally abuse drugs? They'll have nothing. Most of them don't, right? And I have family members, I would say they're adopted family members, that their mother was on drugs. Well, maybe even the blood relatives, cousins who, you know, their parent or parents were on drugs when they were conceived and while pregnant, and they for the most part came out okay. I think one of them had some issues, but Yeah, it's not okay because you're harming a third being, a third life form. Teachers, therapists, psych workers are mandated reporters, and that they will get jailed unless they witness child abuse. Okay, I understand what you're saying now. That they have to report to Child Protective Services. Got it. If not complicit, or if I was complicit in not reporting her and got caught passively permitting her drug use, I can be jailed and prosecuted. I totally get that. I understand what you're saying now. You also say, I just got tired of the rape argument because I by any means dismiss it, but rather wokies go extreme to make a point where they still would be happy to enable, I'm sorry, this is just really hard to read, all of their abortions disingenuous. Right. They try to find these most extreme examples that almost never happen, and it's used to justify the entire thing. It's like, well, no, I mean, most people who are in the pro-choice camp, I think it's something like 75% believe in some kind of restriction for abortion. So this idea that most Americans want abortion, it's just like, yeah, that's not really being honest about it, right? It's not most Americans that want abortion. I guess technically, yeah, it is over 50%. It is most Americans, but it's something like 60% are okay with early term abortions. But anything past second and third second and third trimester abortions, most people want some kind of restriction on. So, yeah, let's be very honest about this stuff. Let's see. You say it's like the argument of censoring free speech in the name of extremist racist hate. That's very marginal, and most people agree it is. Most of the time, it's because they don't want to hear opposing views. Well, right. That's how this started, right? It's just so shocking and offensive to hear hate speech online. You know, they have to be censored and deleted. And then it slowly started spreading. Well, the definition of what hate speech was kept changing. And then they started adding new terms like, oh, it's harassing behavior, or targeted harassment, targeted hate speech, targeting a protected class, and all this other stuff that never existed before and we didn't care about before, but now all of a sudden people do. It's very disingenuous. Yes, I 100% agree. It's because they don't want to hear opposing views. And they know, it's just like the whole Twitter situation. They are freaking out about Elon Musk taking over because they know they're going to lose their political superweapon. Twitter is like a megaphone for the left and the far left because they control it. They dominate 95% of it. Okay? That is their political superweapon where they can broadcast their message to the entire planet. If Elon Musk takes that over, the right wing is going to be able to come up on equal terms with them, and they're freaking out because, oh my gosh, there's going to be hate speech back on here. It's like, well, you know, your definition of hate speech and what I consider hate speech are two separate things. I think the way the left responds to normal conservative talking points is hate speech. Like the way they hate the Republicans. So things are different. You know, it used to be the right wing was the most aggressive in society. 80s, 90s, 80s and 90s, the right wing was the ones that were the biggest threat for society. That quickly changed. That very quickly changed. Probably mid 2000s, it started switching hardcore, like really, really hard push towards the left. And then once Obama got into office, not saying him specifically, but that was like a signal to the left. Like it's everybody pushed really hard, and they started taking over cultural institutions as well as political institutions. And now we got to this point where it's like anything you say that doesn't agree with Democrats is automatically like hate speech or, bigoted or sexist or misogynistic or whatever it may be. Okay. Almost caught up here. Russian Concussion says, we all have biases and nuanced ideas of free speech, of course. People will always be offended to someone or offensive to someone. So I'm assuming that's grow the fuck up and make all speech free and grow some thick skin. Sorry, but not sorry. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Oh, there's a couple here that were YouTube automatically censors certain words in the chat, so it wasn't popping up live. I have to go in manually and do it. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely, I agree with this. Rana Hoskins says, I think a study said 20% of Americans use Twitter and 80% of them are liberal. It's something like that. It's probably less than, it's probably like 17% of Americans use Twitter. But we make up, I think Twitter is 80% American. It's like 70 to 80% of Twitter is American, but only 20% of Americans use Twitter. Wait, put that back. And yeah, most of them are overwhelmingly on the left. Like, that's not even a question. But that's by design too. So they basically, one of the biggest cons of social media platforms, the big ones, is that this is a platform for everyone, come on in, you can make content about whatever you want, just don't break the law. That was the line, right? No illegal content. No child sexual content, or, it's perfectly fine for them to censor like death videos and, people dying in car accidents or getting shot, or, I personally think that should be allowed to a degree, right? Like Twitter is notorious for, you're just scrolling through Twitter and some reporter, breaking news, this bad thing happened, and it's like a certified reporter. Well, I say certified. They work for a media outlet. They're on the ground live streaming some scene, and somebody is dying, and they're bleeding out. It's horrific, and you see that all the time on Twitter. Or they'll be retweeting it. And there's no filter of like, hey, this is sensitive content. There's no way to do that when you're doing it on mobile, to where you can label your own stuff as like self-censor. So you're seeing it all. And we can have a conversation on if they should be able to do that or not. But yeah, there's child stuff on there, which is unfortunate. And they could do a better job at it, at trying to get that stuff off. That's a separate conversation, but yeah, to answer that question fully, Brandon Hoskins, yes, that's exactly what's happening. But I guess let me finish that thought. You can. They got everybody in saying it's an open and free platform. Come do whatever you want except illegal content. And then they slowly started ratcheting up the hyper-partisan rhetoric and the hyper-partisan rules, favoring entirely the Democrats. When I say that entirely the Democrats, I don't mean just, they didn't favor the left. Let's be very clear about this, because there were anti-establishment leftists who were getting deleted, their accounts banned off of social media too. So anti-war leftists banned. That's banned because they're anti-establishment. I would say initially there are some communistic kind of groups who were getting banned, but something switched, right? So initially, I want to say it was this is so long ago at this point, 2014 and 15, initially it was the far left that were getting banned equally as the far right. But then something switched about 2016, 2017. Democrats were like, wait a minute. Let's not do that. Let's ally with these people So the far left were the useful idiots of the Democrat establishment. They would use the far left militants to be their enforcement wing of the Democrat Party. So that's why you have Democrats, Kamala Harris, tweeting out, bail out the BLM Antifa rioters during 2020, the riots, 2020 BLM Antifa riots. Democrats were supporting that stuff because they knew it gave them cover. It gave them political violence in their favor. The right had no such movement. The right doesn't have a political violent faction that could survive like that because they don't have institutional power. So the Democrats they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. Do not think that Democrats are dumb, like the elitist leadership of Democrats. They're not stupid. Okay? They're not stupid. They're just wrong on most of their stances. And they do get some things wrong in the sense of strategy. I think they turned the heat up on the pot way too hot, too quickly. The frog in the pot scenario. They turned it up too quickly, and now we're going to see a potentiality for a massive red wave in the midterms. I don't want to necessarily make a huge prediction, but it's pretty much, people have been saying it, okay? That Republicans are probably going to take the House of Representatives for sure, no question. The Senate remains to be seen for sure. Keep reading some of this. What's some more arguments for or against abortion? I think that's important because the only argument I heard that I wasn't fully sold on, or I hadn't fully made my mind up on, was the rape issue. And let me fully flesh that out because I didn't finish that talking point. I still think it's a third human entity. It is a new human life that will develop into personhood. So I think that's fair to say that, at conception it is not necessarily a person, but it should still be afforded the right of this is a human being, or it has a potentiality for a human being and or personhood. Just like a child does not have equal rights to an 18-year-old adult. Absolutely, they do not. They have a second-class status if you're a minor. Now, we pretend like, oh, that's not really what it's called. It's like, oh, you're a child. Of course they're not going to have the same rights as an adult because they don't know enough to be able to make those decisions. It's like, yeah, but they're second-class citizens. They don't have full status rights. So, of course, the unborn, in the womb, wouldn't have the same rights as a adult human being. That doesn't mean that they still don't have rights, right? You can't just beat a child to death because, oh, well, they're not an adult, so they don't have rights. It's like, no, of course not. That's ridiculous. So, to me, the rape argument is the only complication. It sucks for the woman, and the argument I heard that was the only thing I could steelman out of all of this, the only steelman argument was, it is the only bodily autonomy situation because the woman did not choose to get pregnant. Therefore, it is an imposition on her bodily autonomy to be forced to give her, her blood and her nutrients and her bodily space in her uterus to a being that she did not invite there. Okay? And they will say that, you have their right to evict. And I think that's really interesting. And I don't think we talk about that enough because this is a fairly new argument that is fascinating. And I want to give them credit for that because that's something it doesn't really stump me, but I think if they flesh this out more, if somebody wants to steelman this more and try to push this argument more, I'm open to hearing it. But for me, it's like, okay, I understand that a bad thing happened, but isn't murder worse than a rape? A rape is temporary. Look, hear me out. No, don't freak out and be like, Let me finish my statement. A rape is a temporary action that has a long-term psychological effect most of the time, right? I think we all agree that it could be a couple of seconds to 2 minutes long, however long this rape experience is, this horrific crime against you. Okay? and you're going to be psychologically traumatized for years, sometimes even for life. I understand that. But I'm saying it's not fine. You still get to have a life. You're still breathing. You're still able to live. Versus if you're murdered, that's it. It's final. It's done. There is no counseling or anything. You're just dead, right? So that would be that's my problem here is you are treating a crime by doing a worse crime against another human, another person or potential person. And that doesn't square with me, okay? So there have been other arguments people have been making on the conservative side, and I believe they were Catholic too, so this was interesting. They were like, well, it depends at what time. Well, maybe, hey, can you sit this out for about 6 months, 5 to 6 months? We take the baby out of the womb and put it in an incubator or something, so that way you're not just killing it. Is that an option? I'm like, well, I guess, I mean, it's right now it's up to the woman until Roe is overturned, but I mean, I guess the problem is we can't just take a fertilized zygote out of the womb and put it in a petri dish or put it in an artificial womb yet. That's not a thing. That's not a thing we can do right out of conception. It's not going to live. But if we did have that technology, is that an option? If it is an option at that point, the sci-fi universe where, you know, you can get pregnant or you get raped or whatever happens, you conceive, you can immediately take it out of your womb. Well, then there's no point for abortion. I don't know. This stuff gets really weird. Oh, people. Hold on. I probably can't get to all of these. Excuse me, these comments. Lance Corporal Veteran, hello, good morning. What's this call to arms? Do I break out the toys yet? See, this is what I'm talking about, people. Like, we know what's up, right? There's this whole community of people. Like, we've been, like, you're at a certain level of awareness. We've been watching this stuff for, some of you are way older than me, 50s, 60s, who have been waiting for decades or have been watching this way longer than me. I'm kind of late to the party here. But we know what's up. We know that there's a certain point in time when the left is going to, you know, cross some lines thinking they're big and bad, and it's going to be messy because conservatives have been training. They have a culture of guns from a small age, especially rural areas. There's plenty of videos, and you talk to conservative people in rural areas, they shoot guns constantly. Like, you're shooting guns from a young age, you're training, a lot of them go hunting too, and that's just their culture. So they know what they're doing, versus a city liberal who holds guns like literally like this, like, oh my god, what, like, I've seen liberals. I've seen them. I've worked with them. There was a gun situation at work years and years ago. I say a gun situation. One of the workers had a gun in her purse. She was visiting from another location, and for whatever reason, her purse was open enough, and the manager saw the gun, and he pulled it out like a sissy, like, oh, why do you have this? And I'm like, why are you holding it? Like, I was there watching. I'm like, why are you holding it like that? Well, first of all, why do you need to pull it out? Like, she's allowed to have guns. It's like, whatever, dude. I don't care. But, like, why are you holding it like that? But, sorry, that was a long-winded thing. If you did not see this, Lance Corporal Veteran, let me pull this up again. Lori Lightfoot, this is, 14 hours ago now, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Well, no, that would be 13 hours ago. My mistake. She's Chicago time, so Central Time. But actually, I think this is Twitter automatically goes to your time zone. So I guess 14 hours ago. She said, to my friends in the LGBTQ plus community, the Supreme Court is coming for us next because Lori Lightfoot is a lesbian in a lesbian married relationship. She said, "This moment has to be a call to arms." Her follow-up tweet says, "We will not surrender our rights without a fight. A fight to victory." And it absolutely, I mean, it's literally a call to arms. And her follow-up her follow-up tweet is a confirmation that the context is that she's literally calling for violence. She's calling for people in the gay community, essentially, to take up weapons against the Supreme Court. And more, really. I would assume Republicans in general, but conservatives. So, I don't... I would not say it's time to break out the toys. Well, I would say this. It's time to make sure that they're in good working condition. Make sure they're well oiled. If it is a weapon that needs to be oiled, get rid of the excess oil, of course, so dust doesn't build up. Make sure they're in good working condition, cleaned, ready to go. You have the ammo. You're ready just in case. I would say stand by. Stand by. Just stand by. Because I think this summer is going to be bad. I really do. 2020 was bad. Like, that shocked me. I'd never seen riots like that in my life. We had the BLM riots, the social justice riots throughout the years from, 2014-ish, off and on, the Black Lives Matter riots for these police-involved shootings and deaths and stuff. But yeah, 2020 was a whole nother beast. That was scary. And I was out there covering the riot in Virginia Beach. It was a small riot. I didn't really feel in danger because it was a pretty small riot. There's probably like 20 people, 30 people rioting. It wasn't that bad. The police were probably the scariest part. I'm just going to be honest. Yeah, that was kind of scary, but generally speaking, didn't bother me. I mean, there were tear gas and stuff, but yeah. I guess Lightfoot is calling for violence to pro-lifers. Yeah, I would assume that's included, but I mean, I like to take people at face value. Like, what did they say? And I take them at their word. Like, she says it's a call for violence, and that we're gonna fight for our rights, essentially, and fight till victory. So anyone who is in their way, I suppose, because again, the left right now, the Democrats, they are trying to tie abortion as a right, which I don't think you have a right. I mean, let's just be clear about it. You have a right to an abortion right now. You do have abortion rights right now. Okay. We're trying to take away, I would say the anti-abortion people absolutely want to take that right away. That's fair. That is what's happening. But Roe v. Wade does not take away abortion rights. Roe v. Wade being overturned, it doesn't take away abortion rights. It gives it back to the states, which the states can then take away your abortion rights. So I think that's different. Let's just say the boys are stocked. Yes, absolutely. Oh, no. Oh, dude. Lance Corporal Veteran, you got to get out of there. You're in enemy territory. You're in, the Hellmouth. You're in the Hellmouth, San Francisco Bay Area. Sir. Was it Berkeley? Berkeley's over there too. All those surrounding areas, they're all far left. They're not even just Democrats. They're far left, dude. That's scary. Yeah, if anything happens there, you're just I hope you can go west, east, north, and east. Just drive away from that area if at all possible, because if something goes down, you're just stuck. I've had that conversation too. As a side note, I'm in a giant suburban area, basically. There are some urban areas, but Hampton Roads in Virginia, southeastern part of the state, it's mostly suburbs. But if something goes down here, it's like, can I get out? Can I get out? Obviously, you would have to avoid as many bridges and tunnels as possible. Can you avoid that through back roads? Depends where I'm at. Depends where I'm at. So, at least I'm in Temp, Arizona now. Was in Brook until 19. Okay. Arizona's better. It's a lot more rural, so. The other problem is, like, I think we think about location and stuff like that as, like, is this viable for if society stays as it is? But if we have some kind of breakdown in society, let's say we have the Civil War that I think is coming, and then a World War III breaks out, or in opposite order, World War III breaks out, and then half of America is like, we're not down for this war, and it's only one faction, one political faction that wants the war, then we can have a civil war here too. Okay, well, do you really think that living in a desert is probably your best option? I would say no. I would say try to be where there's forest and rivers and lakes and stuff, so you can at least have access to some kind of water, hopefully be able to do better. Lance Corporal Veteran says, no problem. I am the West County area, Ghettoville people here, working class Mexicans who don't tolerate overt violence. Okay. Yeah, I mean, another problem too is, like, you know, when we're having online discussions and stuff, like, we all don't know what each other's areas are like, and we have these preconceived notions, these stereotypes and biases. Like, I think of California, I think the entire state is a lost cause, but that's not true. Like, Northern California obviously is very different from Southern California, and there's even plenty of spots in any state, really. It's basically just, can people get along? Is there a political diversity, or is it a uniparty type of system that's problematic? Like, I would even say, like, if you're living in an entirely conservative area, I don't know you would want to do that either, but it really depends on your community, right? Do you know your neighbors? You know, do you talk to each other? Do you have, like, a once a month community meeting to make sure everything's running smoothly in the area? Like, stuff like that. I mean, that's ideal. We don't have that anymore. Like, most people don't even do that. Let's see how long I've been going for. About an hour and a half. Is there any more Lori Lightfoot and or abortion stuff that we need to talk about? Let me check Twitter and see. I don't think there's anything new worth talking about, to be honest. Facebook is being, this is a aside, Facebook is being sued for human trafficking its employees in Kenya. Wow. I really hate the term human trafficking because it should have a very specific meaning. Human trafficking meaning, like, you're moving humans around. I understand it implies slavery, but trafficking, like, you're moving a good around. I would say slavery is fair, because when you look at this, like, Facebook was selling human beings. Like, no, they had slaves, essentially, is what this article is saying. And it's saying that they're getting paid about $2.20 an hour. Now, their money value in Kenya. That's different, but apparently that's still very low. And these were content moderators in Kenya who were looking at disturbing violent content and sexually abusive content of minors to regulate it on Facebook. And they're basically getting paid slave wages. So, oh yeah. Well, okay. Well, that's the fun part. This is the fun part that makes America so interesting. Is counties are really the law of the land. If you really go back and look through the laws, the counties are everything, right? You have the federal government, you have states, and you have counties. This municipality thing is not really constitutional. It's like something new that's kind of outside of it, and it's been just grandfathered in. Like we kind of just assume that it makes sense, but it's not. It doesn't make sense. So, technically on paper, as far as I can tell, constitutionally anyway, the only law enforcement that's legal would be federal marshals and sheriffs and their deputies, like county sheriffs and deputies. That's the only really legal law enforcement. And I believe the states too have the right to what's the word? Not deputize. They deputize, but they're allowed to have law enforcement agencies too, the states. But the concept of like a city police officer, I don't believe that's really constitutional. They should technically still be under the county, which would be a sheriff's department. Because sheriffs are elected. Sheriffs are elected. They are elected law enforcement officials. And they can be range from small towns to, big cities. There are sheriff's departments in big cities, and they have arrest authority. I mean, they change from state to state, obviously, but this is super important because it means that you have sanctuary states or sanctuary cities, right, or counties, sanctuary counties, where they said the law in this state is null and void here. You're allowed. California says you can't open carry anymore after the civil rights era when Black Panthers walked armed to the state capitol with weapons, open carrying. Then they hurry up and, we can't have those. I almost said the N-word, the old way we call black people. The N-word with the O at the end. We can't have them with guns to the capitol. That's scary. So they, wrote gun control in California, which is a Democrat, I believe. These were Democrats who did this, I believe. So you have sanctuary cities and counties that are just an open rebellion against the state. And, I'm 100% cool with that. We have that here in Virginia, too. We have two-way sanctuary cities. Norfolk, Virginia Beach, there's a whole bunch of them. They're just like, we're not following Richmond's laws because they're bullshit. They're absolute bullshit. Because Virginia has basically been taken over by Democrats. Sorry, hold on one second. I have a ton of internet tech people coming in. I have Cox Communications and some other companies that I've seen before, so I know who they are. They're upgrading our internet, so hopefully by tomorrow, it looks like, I will have high-speed internet that I will never have shitty quality on this stream ever again, hopefully. But, sanctuary cities and counties and states and stuff is very important. And it absolutely is unenforceable. The state can't come in and be like, you can't do that in this county. It's like, yeah, we can. Sergeant at Arms of Congress. Right. So the Sergeant at Arms, it's like we have these special positions. There's marshals of the Supreme Court too. Like, yeah, they're these constitutional law enforcement agencies, but there is no municipality. Like police on a city level just is outside of constitutionality, because technically how they do it is they will say the governor has to sign off on these, basically deputize these other departments, but it's like that's not really the reading of law, the way it was intended anyway. It's something that we just do now. They have these statewide certifications of police officers. But no, it's supposed to be elected official, elected police officer, the sheriff, or the governor. They can directly deputize or give policing powers to people to become law enforcement. It's not supposed to be a city can just do it itself, because it's a weird status. A city is like a corporation. A county is not a corporation. My understanding. My understanding is a county is a different legal bracket than an incorporated city. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't say that word on YouTube, but how did the N word with ends in a O become a bad word? It's Spanish for black. I agree 100%, but that is YouTube will ding you for saying that. It's so ridiculous. None of this stuff makes sense anymore. It's all convoluted. It's postmodernism nonsense. You know, I know what that word means. I know that it was a term that was widely accepted for hundreds of years for calling, that's what you call black people. That's what they were called in this part of the world. And, well, really much of the world. But yeah, you can't say that on YouTube because it's considered hate speech. It's so stupid. But anyway, is there anything else that I may have missed? Is there any... There's some other good comments in here that I've been missing. Here's a good... such a shame. I love Asian culture and food in San Francisco. Damn, Libby's in big cities. Yeah, I mean, that's always been a problem. Like, you know... we should be able to enjoy other cultures, other people's culture and food and their literature, their language, their history, their music, all that stuff, their art. And for some reason, it's just been like, oh, well, you're not allowed to do that because that's cultural appropriation. I'm like, come on, man. Come on, man. Postmodernism, control language, control people. Absolutely. And this is the problem, right? I try to say as much as I want to say, but I know that if I just go off and start saying, start doing a Lori Lightfoot and calling to arms and saying, 1776 stuff and, stuff that I've always believed for over a decade now. I'm like, I've been ready for a decade. Like, okay, the red line was passed after 9/11 for me. It's like the Patriot Act. That's it. Like, you've just violated the Constitution and there's no coming back. Like, you have to be held to account for that. But, there's like a sprinkling of people that are on that level. And I know that a couple dozen, a couple 10, 20, 30, 50,000 people is not going to do it. We need millions of people on the same page. And if before that, you're basically just suiciding and you're basically, you're a terrorist at that point. If you have a huge army behind you with a huge political backing, financial backing, international backing, then you're freedom fighters and you are legitimate. Look at what's happening in Ukraine and stuff, like the different factions there. They're legitimized despite all the politics and their horrific actions. So I would say we're in a really weird space because we're in this limbo period where it's ratcheting up. The conflict in America is ratcheting up and around the world. And this is the first time in my life that I have seen this level of insanity, like political insanity. Like, it's very clear that this cannot sustain itself, that it's going to spoil over into a civil war, like armed conflict. This is not the type of rage that can be just, we're going to yell at each other and that's it. It's like, no, people have been fighting in the streets for 8 years now. You know, different little skirmishes. Far left versus far right is what started. Antifa versus Proud Boys or something, and all these other different groups. And it happens here and there. And then the far right just stopped because the prosecutions were all one-sided. They're all prosecuting the far right, but completely ignoring the far left. So the far right got wise and was like, it's done, right? We have to wait till the revolution to do anything. And not saying that I agree with them. I definitely don't agree with the far right necessarily. They're political extremists, but it became pretty apparent back in 2014 that only one side was being punished for equal crimes, right? These street brawls. Far right was getting prosecuted. Far left was just run away. They're all wearing all black. They're wearing their all black block uniforms. It's very hard to prosecute somebody in a blackout uniform. Okay, it's hard to identify people. Versus the far right, they weren't necessarily fully face up. People are getting a little smarter, but my point is, I've been there for a long time, and I know better. I'm not retarded. I'm not going to be like, I'm going to go fight. You know, it's like, okay, great. So you're one person trying to stand up against a literal empire. You're going to die and be, well, probably not remembered at all, to be honest, but you're going to be labeled as like a domestic terrorist psychopath. You know, they're going to try to twist and turn everything you're saying. They're going to take my 12 years of YouTube content and they're going to take little clips here and there of me saying extreme things when 98% of my content has been, I've literally cried on YouTube over these news stories that have been happening, like begging people to stop. Like, you had the 90s, the 80s and 90s were pretty good, right? The early 2000s pretty good, where we were for the most part united, racial integration, like we were getting along, we were living with each other. There wasn't really any major problems. Like socially, we were doing okay. Probably one of the best eras in American history. And then we had this massive shift happen. I'd be like begging people, hey, can we go back to the 90s, to the 80s, where we, for the most part, got along? Now it's like the complete opposite. We're going back into segregation and all this other crap. It's like, I don't want to go backwards, right? I don't want to go backwards. I don't want to have a black, go into a place of business. Oh, this is the black entrance. You can't go in here, so you're not black enough. You know, you look like a white person. I'm like, well, I'm actually half black. Well, that's not, sorry, you're not black enough. You know, you're in the other section. I'm like, ugh. Like they want that to happen now. And I'm like, no, like I can take a lot, but that's like a situation where I'm trying to choose my words carefully because I almost said crazy stuff. But if I ever go into a public place of business and they're segregating, I'm trying to calm down. Just even the hypothetical is pissing me off. Let's just say it will be a very bad day for that place of business. There are certain things I can't tolerate, and that's one of them. Like if you can't treat people as equals, baseline, like random strangers as equals, for some arbitrary reason that your politics say otherwise. I don't care if it's far left or right. Far right are retarded too. They're racist, like, oh, you know, everyone who's not white is basically beneath us. They're basically the same as racists. They're neo-racists, but on the right-wing side. And then the left, the far left, are neo-racists. And in the opposite direction, they're positive racists trying to fight racism with racism. It's like both are equally retarded as far as I can tell, as far as I can say. And if I ever go in a public place and they're trying to segregate, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad. So I don't know. But abortion is I guess, to do like a final wrap up on this. Abortion absolutely is a civil war catalyst for America, because I forgot to finish this thought before. It is very much akin to the slavery question back during the Civil War. You know, what is a person? Who has rights? Who has equal rights? Are you a person? Are you a human being? That kind of thing. You know, the enslaved Africans were not considered human. They were not considered people. They had no rights. They had no rights. And I believe the South wanted to use them as, they wanted to be considered persons for voting purposes, give the South more voting power and federally. And the North was like, no, absolutely not. These are slave people. It's obviously like you're basically trying to steal votes. Enslaved people can't possibly have a say in our politics. It makes no sense. And the compromise was the 3/5 compromise. I mean, that was the North. I mean, both sides, as far as I can tell, from my perspective, both sides were assholes for that whole thing. I mean, it was the North who was pushing, northern politics that said that the slaves were not humans. They were 3/4 of a person, while the South was saying no, absolutely, for voting purposes. Obviously, they were still going to be slaves and treated like less than. Let's not get that twisted. But in regards to the abortion, it's very similar. It's absolutely similar, because you're saying that this human being, this life inside of the womb, does not have personhood rights. That it's completely subjective to the woman's whim. Well, that would mean that it's a slave. Okay. And there's also a difference between the cultural or social understanding of the word person versus a legal understanding of a person. A person has rights. Like people, or a person, colloquially, doesn't mean they have rights necessarily, but it's implied. Okay, it's implied. Like aliens coming down from, I don't know, Alpha Centauri or Sirius or some other planet, they're still people. Right, we would still call the aliens people, because they're on a similar equal status as us. Like, they're intelligent beings. They can be people. Would they have personhood rights? Well, I would imagine eventually, sure. Like, if they were permanently residing here for whatever reason, like maybe we had an exchange program, yeah, they would have equal rights eventually. But you'd also have like these catalysts for war there. Like, what do you mean? This literal alien, it's not human whatsoever. Like, what do you mean it has equal rights to me? I'm an American. Like, you're going to have people who are going to do that kind of stuff. Sure. There's always assholes. So, yeah, I guess that's really it for that. Like, to me, I see abortion being a major Civil War catalyst. We should be very weary of that. We should be prepared, because it's entirely the ball is entirely on the left's court here, because conservatives didn't go to war over abortion. They could have, and they would have easily won, right? They would have easily won over the left. We could have had a civil war in what was it, 72, 73, when Roe was decided. We could have had a civil war then, but we decided not to. Or conservatives decided like that wasn't even a question. Of course not. Like, we'll settle this through the political system. But Democrats and leftists, they don't care about our system. They don't care about our political system. They don't care about voting unless it suits them. If they lose in an election, then they'll just riot to try to or try to assassinate. If they lose court cases, you see what they're doing. They're trying to intimidate judges by rioting. Well, they haven't really rioted out front of the houses yet, but they are protesting and picketing and marching in front of judges' houses, Supreme Court justices' houses, which is against federal law. Nothing's happening. No arrests so far. No kind of justice being seen here, the ball is in their court. Okay, conservatives have been patiently waiting, like, bitch, the guns are ready. They're like, bitch, don't do it, bitch. Like, I'm warning you, like, hey, we're trying to get along here. We're trying to just follow the system and follow the rules, and you're acting up. Like, bitch, don't do it. And they keep coming. They keep aggressing. It's only like one side doing it consistently. And again, if they keep doing this, it's going to be the left that is starting this civil war. It is not the conservatives haven't done shit in the last 30 years. As far as I can tell, like anything meaningful that really caused real harm, they're just trying to conserve their traditions. It is the left that is trying to radically change society and is radically altering things the way that they have been. Of course, it's going to upset the system. They're trying to burn down the system and create something new out of the ashes. That's one of their sayings. From the ashes of the old, we will build anew. That's Cripple Veteran says, I believe no one fights wars over moral issues unless leaders can connect the gain or loss of money or power to it. That's pretty much it. I mean, that's spot on. There is no real group of people that are leaderless, right? Or maybe they have leaders, but the leaders are silent. There's no like mass. There's no nation, like hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people throughout history here that I can think of, where the people are just like, we're going to go attack this thing. It's like, no, because leaders, religious and or, you know, the tribal leader, the monarch, the whoever, king, emperor, queen, pushed the people, swayed them in that position. So you're 100% correct. And of course, money is a big thing about it. Money and power. It always has been. I mean, I feel like it's like the whole situation, all these genocides that have been happening around the world. It's like, yeah, ethically, we would go to war and free those people and try to keep these people safe. You know, the Uyghur Muslims in China. I mean, of course you want to keep people as safe as possible. There's no political will for it because that's World War III. If we invade North China to free these Uyghurs, or is it Northwest China? Obviously, it's going to cause a massive war. One that America is not prepared for. We haven't seen a war against a superpower since, World War II. Like a direct war. So we're kind of like, well, a million, let's just say roughly a million Uyghurs may die or be subjugated or abused, and it's just like we can't do anything about it. So, yeah, I mean, it really depends on a lot of things. It really depends. That's really it. That's really all I have for you all today. All I could say is good luck. But yeah, this summer is it's gonna be messed up. This summer is gonna be messed up. There's gonna be a lot of political violence, and I'm wondering when the moderates, centrists, and conservatives are gonna wake up and they start fighting back, like defending your communities. We saw a little bit of that last summer, where communities were, out in front of their community with guns, like, you're not coming in here. Who are you? We don't know who you are. You're not coming in. And they were trying to spread, disinformation, like look at these white supremacists not letting black people into their neighborhood. It's like, dude, they're rioting like 3 blocks away, killing people and burning hundreds of millions of dollars in property damage. I think it's okay that they have their guns out because they don't want their fucking homes burned down. Like, calm down. They're allowed to defend their property. Okay? So, I don't know. Maybe I think people are starting to wake up and figuring out, like, hey, this is not okay. And the government clearly isn't on our side. We're going to have to start, doing what we used to do. A more traditional society where, you dealt in-house. You had an issue in your family, you dealt with it in the home. If it was a little too much for them to handle, it would be family a family would help them, and or community, like your church or your next door neighbors or whoever. They would try to help you in whatever way they could. That includes security. That includes securing your neighborhood. Maybe it's time to say hi to that neighbor that you never talked to, that you've lived next to for 5-10 years. Maybe it's time to meet them and say, hey, how are you doing? So I'm going to leave it there. Be safe, be prepared, and be weary of demonically possessed entities. Or I just say people who act demonic. We'll say that. I'm not going to say that there's demonic entities possessing people, but people sure are acting demonic. So thank you so much for watching, if indeed you still are, and I will see you all next time.